Okay, so here we've got a finished product, which I'm going to show you how you can make one of these rear bike lights that normally runs off a little lithium battery pack like this. They have a tendency to swell up and then they're not so good. I'm going to show you how you can make an alternative power supply for it, which you can then encase in a project box. This one's running off two 18650 lithium batteries, and it's also using a little buck converter there, which are about £1 off eBay, and it's glued on with hot glue. There's some hot glue running around the power connectors, and I'd imagine that will last a heck of a lot longer than the original tiny little battery pack it came with. Just needs to be made watertight before it goes on the bike. Here's an alternative, not using the step down power module, and this works off a standard 18650, no problems. As you can see, there's no additional step down in DC voltage from that 18650, and it runs just fine. So I'm going to show you how to make one of the easier ones. Okay, so step one, you want to get yourself about 70 centimeters of wire. Doesn't have to be particularly thick because there's not a lot of ampage that's going to go through it. Speaker wire will probably do, cheap speaker wire. So the second step after you've cut down your speaker wire is to get this part and make 2 holes through this part using a 2mm drill bit, and that's what we're going to do now quickly. So one about here, apply gentle pressure, you don't want to be drilling into your finger, and the next 2mm hole needs to go right next to the first one, so carefully drill that. So you want those 2 holes to overlap just slightly. And then once you've drilled it, get the wire and just see if it fits. If it doesn't fit, like this hasn't, make the hole just slightly bigger. And I'm just gently teasing it through. It's still a little bit tight, so I'm going to widen the whole bit. And we just do that until it pushes through nicely. You don't want the hole to be too big, and there we go. That is probably going to be watertight as it is, but we can also put some hot glue inside and outside to make sure that no water's going to get in there. So next step is we want to tie a knot into this 2-core cable, and that's just going to provide a bit of strain relief for it in case it gets pulled on, which it shouldn't do, but there we go. You have to plan for all types of eventuality, and that sort of knot about there with about 2.5 centimeters after the knot is about right, or that's about 1 inch if you're American. And then we separate the 2 cores, and I'm just going to strip about 4 or 5mm off the ends, both of those. And then twist those round. That's the first stage. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to tin these 2 bits of wire. Right, so I've just put a little bit of flux on this wire, and I'm just going to tin it. There we go. So if you tin your wires first before you use them, you'll find that it's much easier to solder onto it for the next step. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to solder on the red wire here, and I've already put a little bit of flux between the two cables, and they're clamped into some helping hands. Normally I would have some other helping human hands, but he is controlling the camera. So there we go, just going to melt the flux, and lovely. And the next bit we're going to be doing is the black wire. That's also clamped into the helping hands. Remember not to breathe in the fumes from the soldering iron, they're not good for you. And there we go. So once that's done, we can unclamp it, and I've put some heat shrink sleeving on these connections. So I'm just going to move those up into position, and then with the soldering iron set to about 300 degrees, I'm just going to shrink the heat shrink using the soldering iron. You can use a lighter if you prefer, just needs, or a hot blowgun. So what we're doing here is gently rubbing the heat shrink sleeving along the cable. That will actually seal in that connection nicely. And it gives it a more professional looking look and feel to the job. When you're doing this, try and avoid contact with your soldering iron on the actual, this part. That's not actually heat proof, so it probably will just melt if you touch it on there. Only try and touch the heat shrinking. And that's it. So the next thing we need to do is to put this little on-off switch back in. So it goes into this little hole here, and it's quite difficult to get in, but I've managed to get it in one go there, which is the first time I've done that today, having done 4 of these so far. And then I'm going to push the circuit board back into its sort of final position, and then pull this cable through like that till it gets to about there with the knot. And then we're going to take this piece, and that's the end where the USB plug would be normally plugged in. We're never going to use that again now. We're using 18650 batteries, and we just need to push this back into position. That will hold the PCB in place, printed circuit board, and that is that section complete. Should look like that. And now we're going to work on fitting the power source to it. Okay, so this next section we're going to hook up the 18650 power source to the light. So I just need to split a little bit of this, and I also need to put the heat shrink sleeving on first. Always good to remember to put it on first. I normally remember sometimes after I need to put it on, and then I have to desolder things and resolder them. So remembering to put it on first is good. I'm just going to strip this down about 4mm, just enough to actually make a nice solder connection. I twist them. Some people don't bother, they just stick them straight in flux and tin them. Right, so a little bit of flux on these. Like that. Soldering iron set to just a little bit over 300, 333 actually at the moment. Just going to tin these with the flux. There we go, that's good. Couple of individual bits of shrink sleeve like that. So we got one big bit and two little bits, and it's now remembering which one of these cables, since they're both black, is the one we're going to put the positive down, and it is the one with the bit of a cable identifier on. So it's going to be this one is going to be the positive. So I'm going to employ the helping hands again. Like that. I am going to put a bit of flux on that as well. Can never have too much flux. Well, you can, but flux helps. Don't try soldering without flux, you won't get very far. There we go, that's that one done. Helping hands are great. If you don't have any helping hands, get some helping hands, or get someone to help you hold things. That's me dropping the solder spool. Actually, I'm going to hold this side with my other hand because it's not centered brilliantly. And that's another good connection. So we're going to move the heat sleeve into the middle there. Actually, you can get rid of the helping hands. And same as before, we're just going to shrink the sleeve using the soldering iron. You can get butane powered heat guns that just blow hot air onto these to melt them, to shrink them down, but I don't think you really need those. And if you've got your soldering iron set to around 300, that should do it. And actually, I'm going to test this now before I shrink down the bigger bit of sleeving. So just get a spare 18650 battery. This one came free with something. It's an Ultrafire. Do not buy Ultrafire batteries. They are absolutely rubbish. Get yourself a Samsung or a known brand. And if all that's worked when I press this, it should light up. There we go. So that is now powered by that 18650. We'll finish shrinking down the bigger bit of sleeving. Which does not want to go over the two smaller bits of sleeving, which is typical when you're videoing something Live demos never work well, as everyone knows. The 4 I did previous to this, it went over no problem. So I've made a little box just to house the 18650 batteries for the light, and that goes like that, a few screws on the top, and that's all golden. Now the way I made the mount was just by using, here's another seat that I'm working on at the moment, is just by using a couple of bits of 5mm plywood, and the battery mount screws into that. And this is how it looks from the side, and you can pretty much see how it connects to that little base there. There we go. So this is the alternate style using a single 18650 battery that I've also made. This one doesn't work too bad either. Okay, we're ready now to shrink down this bigger bit of heat shrink sleeve. Same procedure as before. We're just rubbing the soldering iron on, set to around 300 degrees, and that'll shrink down the heat shrink sleeving nicely around all the connectors and make a nice joint. And that is your finished product. You can make a case to put this battery around, and that's it. That's the finished product. The one other thing you can do, as I mentioned before, is just put a bit of hot glue around that to definitely seal that entry into the case. But considering the case has already got kind of a little bit of a gap around it, it's probably watertight enough as it is. So that's it. I hope that was informative and useful. If you like the video, please click like. Please click subscribe as well, because there may be future videos you might enjoy. Thanks a lot for watching.